I opened the envelope thinking it was a card. It was our 10th wedding anniversary after all. Instead, it was divorce papers. No note, no explanation, just cold legalese. I stared at the signature, Elaine's name, my wife, my best friend, the woman I built a house for with my own hands. At first I thought there had been some mistake. We hadn't fought. We weren't perfect, sure. But this felt like getting shot by someone you trusted to watch your back. Then came the whispers. Friends awkwardly avoiding eye contact. A coworker's offhand comment that stopped me cold. You really didn't know. That's when the pieces started falling into place. Elaine and Mark, my best friend, my business partner. They thought they were so clever, hiding in plain sight, meeting in the house I built for her. Plotting behind my back, they thought I was blind, but I had something they didn't know about. A secret I kept quiet until the day I decided to burn everything down legally. You're going to want to hear how this ends because when I played back what they said on camera, even the judge couldn't believe it. What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more real revenge stories. Every single day, this is Revenge with Chris. My name is Thomas Wright. I'm 38 years old and I run a mid-sized construction company out of Nashville, Tennessee. I've always believed in building things that last on homes, friendships, marriages. I met Elaine when I was 24. She was a substitute teacher at my nephew's school. She had this soft, steady smile that made you feel like everything would be okay. Our first date was at a hole-in-the-wall BBQ joint just off I-65. We talked for hours. Elaine wasn't flashy. She didn't need big gestures. She cared about simple things, fresh coffee, rainy mornings, handwritten notes. At least that's what I thought. When we got married, I was just starting my business. I poured everything I had into building our life, both literally and figuratively. We didn't take a honeymoon. Instead, I used the money to put a down payment on a small plot of land and started building her dream house from scratch. Every weekend, she'd bring me lemonade while I worked. She picked the tile for the kitchen, the color of the bedroom walls, even the swing on the porch. She told me once, I don't care about diamonds, I just want a place that feels like us. That meant everything to me. My best friend Mark Daniels was there from day one. We met freshman year in trade school. He was rough around the edges, cocky loud, but loyal. Or so I thought. We started the company together, split the business 50-50. He was the face of things, the talker. I was the builder, the one on site making sure things actually got done. There were years we barely scraped by. Elaine worked part-time at the library just to help keep us afloat. We were a team, Elaine, Mark, and me. At least that's the story I told myself. Looking back, there were signs. Mark would drop by the house when I wasn't there, said it was to go over invoices with Elaine. I thought nothing of it. She was good with numbers, helped us organize the business side when things got busy. I even thanked her for stepping up. God, I thanked her. We hit our stride in year 8, business took off, we landed a few big clients, custom homes in the suburbs, even a mini-mall renovation. I started breathing easier, thinking we'd made it. Elaine stopped working. I told her she didn't have to worry about anything anymore. Just enjoy the home we built. Live easy. She started going to yoga more. Book clubs, wine nights. She seemed happier. I thought I'd finally given her the life she deserved. That anniversary night, I had dinner planned. I made a reservation at the steakhouse where we celebrated our 5th year. Got her a silver locket with our wedding date engraved inside. I even left work early to pick up flowers. But when I got home, the house was quiet. There was no music, no candles, just an envelope on the counter, addressed to me and inside the divorce papers. I remember standing there holding that envelope, staring at the swing on the porch, the one I built, the one where she used to kiss me goodnight. Everything felt fake, like someone had swapped out my life when I wasn't looking. I didn't yell, I didn't call, I just stood there. And then I started thinking about the little things, the missing time, the quiet conversations, the glances, and somewhere in that stillness, I knew this wasn't sudden. It had been building for a long time, and now I needed to figure out just how deep the betrayal went. For the first few days, I was numb. I didn't reply to the papers. Didn't go into work, didn't even call Elaine. I just sat in the living room, surrounded by the home. I built floorboards. I laid myself the fireplace. I bricked by hand, the kitchen island she picked out and tried to breathe. Then one afternoon I got a text. It was from Danny, one of my crew guys. Hey man, sorry to hear about you and Elaine. Didn't want to say anything before, but people been talking. I called him immediately. What do you mean talking? I asked. He hesitated, then blurted it out. About her and Mark, man, people saw them together a lot. Real friendly, like, real friendly. My heart dropped. Mark. My best friend since college. The guy who gave the best man speech at our wedding. No, that didn't make sense. But something shifted in my gut. A cold, heavy knot formed. I started thinking back those late meetings Mark had, the times he said he'd check in on Elaine while I was out of town, how she'd laugh at his jokes more than mine. At the time, I chalked it up to old friendship. I called around quietly. People were hesitant at first, but the more I asked, the more I heard, yeah, I saw them leaving together once after work. She was at the job site last month, but you weren't there. I figured you knew. Then I remembered the security system 6 months ago. We had a break-in scare. It was nothing serious, just a false alarm, but it had been enough for me to install a high-end system, cameras in all the common areas, motion sensors, full home network logging. Elaine had rolled her eyes at the time, said I was being paranoid. I shrugged it off, told her it was for peace of mind. Turns out it would become the one smart thing I did that year. That night I pulled up the footage. I started scanning random days looking for anything off. And it didn't take long. The first video was from a Thursday afternoon. I was at the office. Mark walked into the house like he owned it. Elaine greeted him at the door with a kiss. I paused the footage, sat back in my chair, let the silence wrap around me like ice. Then I hit play. They walked into the kitchen, laughed open wine. She sat on the counter. He stood between her legs. They kissed again, then again. Eventually, they disappeared down the hallway into our bedroom. I didn't need to watch the rest, but I did not because I wanted to torture myself, but because I needed to know. I needed proof. Over the next week, I combed through weeks of footage, dozens of visits, different outfits, sometimes short, sometimes hours long. Sometimes they brought takeout and watched movies. Sometimes they danced in the living room. Every visit was another knife in the ribs. But what crushed me most wasn't the physical betrayal. It was what they said. The system had mics, not great ones, but enough. One night I caught Mark saying, "He still thinks you're the perfect little housewife. Poor bastard." Elaine laughed. "He still leaves me notes on the fridge like we're in a Nicholas Sparks movie." Mark, "We're going to take everything. He won't even see it coming." Elaine, "Let him have his little construction projects. We'll take the house. The business. Then we're free." That broke me. Not just the cheating, not just the deception, but the complete lack of remorse, the cruelty. Like I was a joke, a placeholder. A means to an end. They weren't just betraying me emotionally. They were planning to wipe me out, personally, professionally, financially. And suddenly all the pieces clicked. The missed payments, the lost bids, the suppliers suddenly pulling out of contracts. It wasn't bad luck. Mark had been sabotaging our business from the inside. And Elaine, she was in on it. That's when the pain faded, and something colder took its place. Resolve. I wasn't going to yell, wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to beg. I was going to document, plan, and strike. They thought I was blind, they thought I was broken, but they had no idea what I had. And what I was about to do next, I stopped sleeping. Not from heartbreak, from clarity. Every night I sat in my office with headphones on, watching the people I trusted most laugh about how they were going to destroy me. There was one clip I kept coming back to. It was a rainy Tuesday. Elaine was curled up on the couch in my favorite hoodie. My hoodie sipping wine. Mark was pacing the living room, agitated. I told him the project was delayed because of the permits. Mark said Elaine laughed, and he believed you. Mark smirked. He's always trusted me too much. That's his problem. Then he sat beside her, put an arm around her shoulder. He still thinks I'm his friend. That was it. That was the last thread holding back the flood. They weren't just cheating on me. They were mocking me, using me. living in the home I built, spending money I earned while plotting to bury me alive. There's something that breaks inside you when you realize your love story was just a script written by someone else. And they'd already penned the ending. Without you in it, I watched as Mark suggested Elaine file the divorce first. Hit him on the anniversary, he said. It'll rattle him. That's when we make our move on the company. While he's emotional, she nodded. He'll sign anything when he's hurt. And that's when I knew there was no saving anything. Not the marriage, not the friendship, not the business we built. I wasn't just out of the picture. They were planning to erase me completely. I closed the laptop, sat in the dark for what felt like an hour. Then I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My younger brother, Rick and I hadn't always been close. We took different paths, me into construction, him into finance. But one thing Rick always had was vision. When I told him what was happening, he didn't even pause. You want to hit back? He asked. Yes. You want to do it loud or legal good, he said. Then listen carefully. Over the next few days, I followed Rick's instructions, quietly, methodically. First, I visited my attorney, a woman named Kelly I'd worked with on contract disputes. I showed her the footage. She didn't flinch. Don't confront them yet. She said, you'll spook them, keep collecting. So I did, every suspicious invoice, every email where Mark approved payments without my sign-off. He'd been moving money into a shell account I hadn't noticed, one tied to Elaine's name. They were funneling profits out of the company while I was busting my back on job sites. I pulled company server logs, matched dates of missing inventory, with footage of Mark loading materials into his truck. Materials that never made it to any official site. Meanwhile, I went to the bank. Took out a loan using my 50% share in the business as collateral. Not a huge amount, but enough. Rick helped me set up a new LLC under his name. Same field, different branding. Rick handled the paperwork, I brought the contacts and the know-how. By the time Elaine started moving her things out, I already had a full financial firewall. Separate accounts, new lawyers. Paper trails of everything. I didn't yell, didn't plead. When she handed me a thin envelope with divorce updates, I just nodded. She tilted her head. You're taking this? Well, I smiled. Why wouldn't I? She had no idea, none, that I'd already started the next phase. That I'd already planned my counterattack. That the man she thought she'd broken was watching her dig her own grave with a smile. Because this time I wasn't going to stop them. I was going to let them think they'd won. Right up until the moment the floor collapsed beneath their feet. The beauty of a slow burn is that no one sees the fire until it's too late. Elaine moved out the following week. She took half the furniture, most of which I'd built myself. Didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. She left her keys on the counter like she was quitting a job. I watched her drive away from the upstairs window. Then I walked down to the basement and opened the cabinet where I kept all the blueprints of houses I'd built, including this one. And I smiled. Because the real foundation wasn't brick or wood, it was evidence. That night I printed 3 copies of everything: video, stills, audio transcripts, transaction logs, materials receipts, client correspondence, even email threads between Mark and Elaine that I pulled off the company server. Every single document was time-stamped, labeled, and backed up to a secure cloud folder. Kelly, my lawyer, had a copy, Rick had another, and I kept one in a locked drawer in my home office. Then I turned my focus to the business. Mark still didn't know I was on to him. He thought I was spiraling. He even sent me a text. Hope you're taking care of yourself, buddy. Let me know if you need time off. What a joke. I went to the next board meeting as usual. Smiled, nodded. Let him run his mouth about cash flow, issues, project delays, and employee morale. Meanwhile, I was meeting privately with our biggest clients, explaining that I'd be stepping away from the current firm and launching something better. Most of them weren't surprised. They'd grown tired of Mark's arrogance. He took credit for designs I created, missed deadlines, overpromised, and underdelivered. One client said, "We only stayed because of you, Thomas. You're the one who showed up." In less than 3 weeks, I had 5 contracts signed for the new company, Wright Built Homes, LLC. Rick was listed as managing partner. I was senior consultant on paper. But we both knew who was really running things. We hired lean, only the best guys from my old crew. I offered them better rates and full transparency. They came without hesitation. Meanwhile, I let Mark dig deeper. He signed off on 2 shady equipment purchases under the old business misuse funds again, this time to pay for what looked like a honeymoon trip to Aruba. Kelly nearly laughed when she saw the receipt. Using company funds for a romantic getaway with your partner's wife, she said. That's breach of fiduciary duty, and then some. We waited until they made it official. Elaine and Mark finally posted a photo together on social media, smiling on a beach, champagne in hand, captioned, "New beginnings, love always wins." They had no idea I'd been holding the sword the whole time, and I was about to swing it. The next Monday, they walked into the office like they owned the place. Mark was whistling, Elaine wore sunglasses indoors. I was already sitting in the conference room with Kelly and a court server. Mark froze when he saw us. Elaine turned pale. The server handed them 2 envelopes, one for Elaine. My official response to the divorce, including infidelity evidence, which would reduce her claims under Tennessee law. The other was for Mark, notice of a civil lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty fraud and misappropriation of company assets. Mark tried to laugh it off. This is a joke, right? I didn't say a word. Just pulled out a thumb drive and placed it on the table. Everything's on here, I said. Footage, audio receipts, email logs. Elaine opened hers. Read the first page, then the second. Her hands started to shake. Kelly leaned in. If you contest any of this, we'll proceed to trial, which means your little beach getaway becomes part of the public record. Mark's face went red. He stood up, knocked over his chair, and stormed out. Elaine stayed seated, blinking fast, trying not to cry. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Not after what I heard her say on those recordings. I never loved him, she'd whispered once to Mark. He's just useful. Now I was done being useful, she whispered once. Now the whole courtroom would hear her say it out loud. Court day came faster than I expected. Part of me hoped they'd settle quietly, but pride makes people foolish. Elaine contested the divorce terms. Mark countersued for defamation, claiming I slandered his professional reputation. The arrogance was unreal. They truly thought they could flip the script, paint me as bitter, jealous, unstable. What they didn't expect was just how prepared I was. In that courtroom, I sat silent. Let the evidence speak for me. First came the financials, bank transfers, fake vendor invoices, misused company credit cards. Then came the footage. Hours of them together in my house, laughing, kissing, mocking me. But what hit hardest wasn't what they did. It was what they said. On the screen, Mark's voice filled the courtroom. He'll crumble. He always does, Elaine responded. He built this whole life thinking, I actually wanted it. I heard someone gasp. It might have been the judge. Elaine tried to protest. That footage is taken out of context, but her voice was shaking Mark. He sat stone-faced. He didn't say a word. Just stared at the table like he could disappear into it. My attorney stood up. Your Honor, she said, this isn't just infidelity. This is calculated fraud, emotional manipulation, financial sabotage, and a complete betrayal of fiduciary trust. She turned toward me. My client didn't just lose a wife and a business partner, he nearly lost everything. The judge nodded slowly, then he spoke firm and final. Elaine's petition for alimony. Denied her attempt to claim partial ownership of my company. Denied her share of marital assets, reduced by 60% due to infidelity and fraud. As for Mark, he was ordered to pay restitution for the misappropriated funds, stripped of his title, forced to sell his 50% share of the company to me at a court-mandated discount. It was over, not with a shout, but with the quiet sound of a gavel hitting wood. Outside the courthouse, Elaine tried to catch me as I walked to my truck. Thomas, please, she said, tears on her cheeks. We were just lost. I never meant to hurt you this way. I stopped, looked at her, and for the first time I felt nothing. You didn't just hurt me, I said. You built a whole life on top of me and expected me to lie still. Then I got in my truck and drove off. No looking back. Over the next few months, everything changed. I absorbed the company fully, rebranded it under the Wright Built Homes name. We signed 2 new development projects and doubled our client base within 6 months. Rick stayed on as CFO. The crew I brought with me became family. We worked harder, faster, smarter. And me, I stopped leaving notes on the fridge. I stopped waiting for someone else to value what I brought to the table. One afternoon, I met a client named Jenna. She was renovating her late father's cabin and needed someone who actually cared about craftsmanship. We started slow lunches, long conversations. She asked questions no one had ever cared to ask before. Not about what I did, but why I did it, what I loved about it. 2 years later, she stood beside me as we broke ground on our new home. One we designed together. No secrets, no lies. As for Mark last, I heard he moved to Florida and tried starting his own firm. Didn't go well. Word gets around in this business. Elaine filed for bankruptcy a year after the judgment. She called once. Left a voicemail, said she missed the simple life. I never called back. Some things are better left in the past. Justice doesn't always come fast and it never comes easy. But when it does, it lands like concrete, solid, permanent. Just like the homes I build, it's strange how silence can feel peaceful after years of noise. These days I wake up early, not because I'm haunted, but because I'm grounded. I make coffee, open the shop, put my hands to work on something real, something that won't lie to me. Some mornings I catch myself standing on the porch of my new home, watching Jenna water the garden we planted together. She doesn't know everything I've been through, but she respects it. She respects me. We don't talk about the past much. It's not that I've forgotten, it's just that I've outgrown it. You see, betrayal doesn't just break you, it reshapes you. And if you let it, it turns you into something stronger than before. I used to think loyalty meant sticking around no matter what, but now I know better. Loyalty without respect is just a leash. Elaine and Mark took the worst parts of me and tried to bury them, but they didn't know the foundation. I'd laid the values, the grit, the quiet strength that comes from building something with your own hands. And in the end, that's what saved me. So what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have stayed quiet or fought back? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what part of the story hit you hardest. And if you believe in second chances, in quiet strength, in justice earned the hard way, then you're already part of the Chris fam. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Chris so you never miss a powerful new karma story every single day. I'm Thomas Wright, and this was my story.